Everyone, I'd like to welcome you to the meeting of the Wolfeboro Zoning Board of Adjustment. We have one, perhaps two matters on the docket for this evening, depending on how the first one goes. First, let me introduce the members of the board. I'm Fred Tedeschi. I act as chairman. To my immediate right is Mike Hodder. He's vice chairman. To his immediate right is Chris Fanson, our clerk. And to her immediate right is Suzanne Ryan, a member of the board. To my left is Sarah Silk, alternate. To her left is Hank Y., a member of the board, and to his left is Susan Razor, an alternate. Will the clerk read the notice of the first meeting, please?
This is case 02-AAD-17 regarding tax map number 148. I think it's 10, but in one place it was 010 or something. It's a public hearing for an appeal of an administrative decision that was made by the Director of Planning and Development, concluding that the use of the subject property as an automobile repair facility and auto body shop has been abandoned. The property is located at 486 Center Street, and this is about Section 175-43 of the Wolfeboro Zoning Code. A site visit was held at about 4:10. I do have the minutes from that. I know personally I was not able to make it to the site visit, but I did go on Sunday.
Do we have someone present to speak for the petitioner? Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Good evening. My name's Randy Walker. I work for Walker & Varney here in Wolfeboro. I'm here tonight representing Peg Leg Realty, Inc., or LLC, which owns the subject property located at 486 Center Street. I'm also here with Salvatore Nicastro, who you know as Sal, who owns the building right next door, Sal's Sunoco. We're here tonight on two matters, a variance and an administrative appeal. I'll do the variance first, and if that should be granted, then we don't need to do the administrative appeal. The goal this evening is to obtain...
Wait a second.
We're doing the administrative appeal first.
Say again?
We're doing the administrative appeal first?
I was going to do the variance first.
You could do that, but then we're going to hold on making that decision. Yeah, the agenda says that the administrative hearing comes first.
I can do it that way, although I prefer to do the variance. Does it make a difference to the board which way it goes?
Well, I would think, and I'd have to poll my members, that if we overturn the planner's ruling and find that the non-conforming use continues, we don't need to grant the variance?
Right.
Correct, and I think the same in reverse. If the variance granted, we don't need to do the administrative appeal.
I think that point's arguable. The argument could be made that the use, and we're getting into the matter of the case now, and if you don't want me to, I'll stop. You could make an argument that the use as an automobile repair facility had effectively been replaced by the planning board's grant of a less non-conforming use, namely the garden repair center use. And in order to get the more non-conforming use back in play again, the AAD has to be overturned and then a variance requested for the more non-conforming use, the automobile repair facility. It would seem to me that the way two cases are listed on the agenda would make the logical sense for progression, but again, I'm just one board member.
Yeah, I don't agree with that. If the variance is granted, it'd be varying the ordinance to allow us to do the uses. But we're here at your pleasure, so if you'd like us to do the administrative appeal first, we can absolutely do that, but I would have preferred the other.
Appeal first.
Polling the board, appeal first. Appeal first. Appeal first?
I'm neutral.
Neutral, okay.
I'll go along with the board.
Okay, so it's 4 deciding to hear the appeal first and 1 go along with the rest of us. Thank you.
So doing the administrative appeal first, the town planner rendered a decision on February 3rd of 2017, roughly a month ago. And although I thought it was well-written and carefully considered, and I'm basically following my application, I think it misses the mark by suggesting that a variance is needed to use the subject property as an automobile repair facility. Both the federal and the New Hampshire Constitution permit and protect an owner's property rights. And these constitutional rights are reinforced by statute in RSA 674:19. That statute very succinctly says that a zoning ordinance adopted under RSA 674:16 shall not apply to existing structures or to the existing use of any building. And consistently, the grandfathered nonconforming uses that are on that property are vested and inviolate here in Wolfeboro. Now, our own ordinance, section 175:43, says, and again in a single sentence, and this is a very common provision throughout the state, that any nonconforming use that is discontinued or abandoned for a period of 1 year or more cannot be resumed. Now, assuming arguendo that that 1 year rule applies, the current owner has not lost its right to reestablish that use because it hasn't discontinued that use for a period in excess of 1 year. Now, the ordinance is very black and white. It's not gray, it's very black and white, and there's no intent provision in our ordinance. There's a number of cases that say you can have the intent provision in there if you'd like, but a more recent case of McKenzie, which I cited in my materials, as well as the Pike Industries case, which the town planner cited in his planner review, both jettison the intent provision. And we employ in Wolfeboro a very rigid 1 year test, and that 1 year has not elapsed. You have in your file a letter from Richard Kendall suggesting that, and he's the owner of Western Auto Body, but owned this property under the name of Skunk Brook Realty for a number of years, and he indicated that he had used this property as an automobile repair and auto body facility. We're not trying to have an auto body facility resurrected, just the automobile repair facility. But that he indicated that he's used it within the period of 1 year. Now, the Wolfeboro ordinance, to get directly to your question, Mr. Harder, is that we could have said that if you discontinue the use, you lose it. Or you abandon it, you lose it. We don't say that. We say you have to discontinue it, and then a year has to go by. You know, you discontinue it 1 day, 1 week, 6 months, or whatever it might be, you lose it. Wolfeboro gives you a full year to resurrect it. And the mere fact that another use may be put into place, I don't think negates that. Our ordinance could have said that. If you use it for something else, you lose it. But our ordinance doesn't say that. Our ordinance, like most ordinances, simply says if you don't use it for a year, you lose it. Well, this property has been used as an automobile repair facility within the last year, according to Mr. Kendall's letter. And if you look at Rob Hausman's letter of February 2nd, which I believe I attached in here, he indicated, I'll just dig down to it, he indicates in here the current use of an automobile repair facility, including a body shop, as a lawfully existing non-conforming use. Number two, that use is still active and not been lost, and that it could continue as a lawfully existing grandfathered use. So we believe that because this property has been used as an automobile repair facility within the last year, it's not lost. It's also been used in that capacity for 50 years. Since 1963, you look at Rob's letter, this property has been used as an automobile repair facility. So we're not trying to get something that's brand new that's coming back. This is a well-established commercial property that's been used in that capacity by Everett Albee, by Rick Curran and Charlie Smith, by the French family when they ran French Auto Body. Then it was used by European Auto Works, and then Western Auto Body under Skunk Brook, and of course the current use for about 3 months was used for something other than that last summer, and that proved not to be financially viable and has is closed. We're trying to go back retroactively to use that historic 50-year-plus use. So that's our argument on appeal of administrative decision. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions?
If I may?
Want to start? Certainly, please.
Thank you. Attorney Walker, I'm not suggesting that use as an automobile repair facility and a body shop was abandoned or discontinued. My argument is that the use was changed. And the use was changed from that of an automobile repair facility and an auto body shop to that intended by the applicant, Alex Hunt, at the time, as when he appeared before the planning board. His agent testified to that effect in the comments that he made. They're legible, visible in the minutes of the planning board meeting of March the 15th, which postdates the February 2nd letter from Mr. Hausman, the then at the time planner, and Jeffrey Lewis of North Point Engineering says, and I quote, he noted the change of use is to a less non-conforming use. So he uses the word change of use himself, and that means to me that we had a use as one. We now have, as of the approval by the planning board, a use which is quite different from that originally pre-existing, and I agree with you, pre-existing since about 1960, early 1960s on that site. Given that fact, the use was effectively abandoned because it was changed. The wording wasn't the same as found in the statute. As far as the timing of the 1-year requirement before the use is actually abandoned, there was no intention to abandon that use. The use was given up voluntarily and turned into a different kind of a use. That's my argument on which to base what appears to be support for the AAD here. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ben?
Yes, along those lines. Mr. Hausman's letter also of February 2, 2016 states currently used as an auto shop, and it refers to the conversion of use. In other words, they've converted it to another use, which is less non-conforming. The tax card also calls it an auto body shop. The 1993 letter issued by the code enforcement officer also talks to the use of a body shop, and you're asking for an auto repair and auto sales to be included with your proposal. As far as I can see, those requests are making a non-conforming use more non-conforming. The purpose of allowing non-conforming uses to exist is to not take away their right. But then again, the town then takes the next steps, which is tries to bring conformity. And the planning board did that when they, in essence, rescinded that, or sunset that last use and granted the new use for the garden tractor supply repair type business. It was a lesser invasive use, a lighter use. So I don't see that your request complies.
From when I review it, I'm not really even sure that an abandonment did occur, because to me the use it changed, but it was not a significant change. I mean, they were still repairing engines. They still maintained the building in the same, pretty much the same manner that it had been for as long as that building existed. So to me, it was not a substantial change. It was a very minor change to a less, from a non-conforming to a more, it was less non-conforming, I guess is the word, but I still don't believe that they abandoned the initial non-conforming use, which was that of repairing engines. So previously it was an engine in a vehicle, and when Mr. Hunt took it over, it was the repair of small equipment.
I think that's where you've got a misconception. It was an auto body repair shop, as stated in letters from the code officer, as stated on the tax card. It wasn't an auto engine repair.
It was, because I took my car for repairs there, and they were not doing body work at the time, and that was in 2013.
Perhaps they were in violation.
No, I believe it was a body shop / repair, and they chose not to do the body work there.
At any rate, I think the primary issue is you cannot, or you're not supposed to, there's case law, the town has set it up this way, you cannot revert backwards. You're supposed to try to come more in compliance, and that's with lots or uses. And that would be going backwards.
Other comments? I had a question, Counselor. The second sentence of 674-19, which was not mentioned, says that the zoning ordinance, I believe refers to zoning ordinance, shall apply to any alteration of a building for use for a purpose or in a manner which is substantially different from the use to which it was put before the alteration. I believe when we did the site visit, there was a question about were there garage doors, overhead doors in the front at that location, and I understand the response was that those doors were removed. The only overhead door is in the rear, that there were some other alterations done to the building. So could you comment on whether you feel that alteration of the building for use for a purpose in a manner which is substantially different from the one to which it was put before the alteration?
Yeah, I don't believe that the doors have changed. That building did not have any doors on the front. The access is only to the back. There are two bays back there right now. There's one main door that you saw, and if you went around to the far back, at one point there was a brake alignment business in there. A gentleman named Richard, somebody who lived on Beach Pond Road, ran that. But there's only been two bays on the back. The building hasn't changed significantly in 50 years.
Mr. Chairman, I concur with the appellant's attorney. I used to go to Kevin Nunley's shop for years and years, as long as he was there. And I specifically asked Alex Hunt this afternoon when we went to the site visit if the bays had been changed, if any alterations had been made inside, and he said no. The building externally and possibly mostly internally is essentially as it was prior to Alex's taking over the building.
Chris?
I have a question because we always want to have a less non-conforming trend. And if I'm looking at this correctly, I know that when it was changed to the garden supply, for lack of a better term, repairs, that there had to become more into compliance by removing some of the pavement and changing the landscape and increasing the amount of pervious material. So to me, that means that you were going toward a different use. You were meeting our requirements for stormwater management, and I'm concerned that now if it reverts back or stays an auto repair facility, if I'm looking at this correctly, it looks like there's going to be a request to add that pavement back in. So to me, that is a significant change in the use.
Other comments? Did you have something else?
Yes, I did make those notes. Christine, you're on the right track. The planning board did ask for site modifications, and that was reduce the pavement surface, access change. The state required them to have a 22-foot driveway, and reduce the parking. And also the state made in their approval that there is a catch-all phrase that any change in use or increase in use, they'll have to reapply for the state driveway application. But the factors to be considered are the nature and purpose of the prevailing nonconforming use and the proposed changes and the effect that it would have. It says, because nonconforming uses violate the spirit of the zoning law any enlargement or extension must be carefully limited to promote the purpose of reducing them to conformity as quickly as possible. That's from one of the handbooks from 2009. So it's probably an improper term, but this is going backwards, not forward. It's the wish of the town, the way they vote the zoning ordinances, and it's a residential zone.
And along those lines, if I could, I was just going to read the purpose for the zoning in that area to remind us all of what it is. It says, "The rural residential district has a district boundary based on the area between the 2½ mile arc from the center of the village and the agricultural district, and without services or public sewer and water. It's designed to provide low density in order to preserve open space, reduce demand for services, and reduce scattered and premature development." And just up the road, we have the Center Street zoning, which stresses maintaining open space and the water quality and protecting the gateways to the town.
Mr. Chairman, I think we're getting pretty far away from the purposes of an AAD, and I think that we're also trespassing on the ground of the planning board for site plan review. So I would suggest that we get back to what we're supposed to be doing here, and that's reviewing Mr. Sullivan's decision and seeing whether or not he did a correct job in application of the ordinance in question.
Thank you.
Can I respond?
Certainly.
So, to the comments that the two of you had on the side, I think that it's not applicable whether this is more conforming or less conforming. Our position is that we're grandfathered. You're trying to take away vested legal rights that we have, and or that the town planner did by his letter, and we're trying to just simply suggest we have these rights. They shouldn't have been taken away in the first instance. We don't have to reapply whether we're more conforming or less conforming. That's not the test. It's whether we're grandfathered or not. If we're grandfathered, then we get to stay, and if we're not grandfathered, then we don't. So this isn't a case of whether we're more or less conforming. We're not trying to change the building or the parking area. All the changes that the planning board required a year or so ago, everything's going to stay the same. Again, I'm getting a little off base, but that's to respond to that. The ordinance itself, I think, is rather plain. It's clear and it's unambiguous. And the language does not suggest that there was an intent or a change of use. I think it's pretty clear that there was an auto body shop there, an auto body repair facility, I should say, for a long, long time. The applicant went before the planning board and got approval to make it a small engine repair and sale facility. It's my position that if we'd gone more than a year, we wouldn't be standing here today. We came very close to that year. But just because you try another use, it doesn't work out, I don't necessarily think you can go back. And I could not find a case that supported the position that some of you are articulating, that once you change that use, you can't go back. The ordinance doesn't say if you change it, you can't go back. The ordinance says is you have that use, and a year after that, you can use that use. And that's the time frame. If it said if you change it, you lose it, we wouldn't be here. But the ordinance doesn't say that. The ordinance is very clear. You have the use. You don't use that for a year, then you lose it. Doesn't talk about the change, which I think I indicated in the application was sort of a 3-month hiccup that didn't bear out. And the intent, again, is not relevant. That McKenzie case and the Pike case that the town planner cites suggest that what the intent is really isn't relevant. It's an objective test. Did you have the use within 1 year? That's usually the battle. Has it been a year or more? If it's been less than a year, you get to keep it. If it's been more than a year, you lose it.
I have a question about the timing. As I understand it, it was January 21st of 2016 where there was essentially the change. Are you saying that you think the year is from the planning board date in April?
No, good question. The key would be when the use stopped. You have a letter in your file from a prior owner, Richard Kendall, who owns Western Auto Body, that said he stopped using that as an automobile repair facility on February 26th of 2016. This application was 51 weeks after that, within the one-year period. We were very cautious, and that's one of the reasons that we did what we did from a timing perspective, because if we'd waited 2 more weeks, I wouldn't be making the argument. But you have a letter that was just signed 3 weeks ago by Richard Kendall that said, I stopped that use on February 26, 2016, but the application before this board was filed on February 14th, on Valentine's Day, 2 weeks before that 1 year expired. So I think we're very clearly, and you couple that with Rob Hausman's letter, that we're within the 1 year period.
Other questions for Mr. Walker? Suzanne?
You state here in one of your documents, the purpose of the applicant, he has no intention of providing auto body service, and in essence is simply trying to trade said use for limited automobile sales. Now, if that isn't a dramatic change in use to a more non-conforming use, which is not allowed anywhere in this zone, I don't know what is.
That would be under the variance application. That would not apply directly to this.
Well, it's the purpose why you're here.
Just for clarification purposes, you're not claiming grandfathered rights for sales of automobiles?
Correct.
Okay. Any other questions for?
Yeah, as I understand this, when Randy is talking about grandfathered rights, he's talking about the business that existed before the change of use on April 19th. Is that not correct?
I'd say that's correct.
But that went away on April 19th, 2016, when the use was changed. So the non-conforming use that is in there right now, that is establishing grandfathering, is the use that was voted on by the planning board at their site plan review and approved on April 19th, 2016.
The year hasn't come up on that, so that's where you've got to go back.
Randy, the year doesn't matter anymore because that use went away. Any use that existed before April 19th, 2016 went away when this planning board decision came down. It's now a new use, which is a less intense use than the previous use. You're beating a dead horse.
I hear what you're saying. Mr. Hodder, I think, concurs with that same position.
I would
We
not
respect.
exactly concur. I don't beat dead horses, Randy.
Okay, sorry.
We passed that issue long before.
It's our position that the change, that the ordinance is not interpreted the way you're suggesting it is. The ordinance says if you have a use and it's been abandoned for a year, you lose it. That year is not gone, even though there's been an interim change in use, as you point out.
But that use no longer existed after the April 19th, Randy. It was changed by the planning board at the request of the person that had the property at the time.
I hear what you're saying, and if that's the position you take, then clearly you'll vote against this.
I'm an alternate, I don't vote.
So sorry.
Any other questions for Mr. Walker? Thank you. Anyone wish to speak in opposition? Mr. Murray.
Good evening. My name's Roger Murray. This evening, I'm appearing before you on behalf of the Wentworth Watershed Association, which is a result of a combining of the Lake Wentworth Association and the Lake Wentworth Foundation. And I'm here to urge you to uphold Matt Sullivan's decision that the use of the property as an automobile repair facility and auto body shop has been abandoned, basically for the reasons set forth in his February 3rd, 2017 letter to Attorney Walker. Bradley's Hardware came before the town and sought approval for retail sales and renter center for outdoor equipment. That was approved by the planning board. Renovations were made to the property. A certificate of occupancy was issued. When that happened, the old use of the property went away. It was terminated and, in effect, voluntarily abandoned by the property owner. Once that use is changed, you can't go back to a different prior use. I think Matt summed it up nicely in his letter when he said the abandonment clause is not intended to allow the property owner to go back to a prior non-conforming use within a year after testing the waters for other uses. The one-year provision of Section 175-43 has no application to what is proposed here. It's not a question of whether some non-conforming use lapsed for inactivity. The property owner voluntarily changed it. And if you try to make that apply here, that would mean that if you have a non-conforming use and you change it to another non-conforming use, and you decide you don't like the second non-conforming use, then within 1 year you can go back to the prior non-conforming use. But if the uses were conforming, you couldn't do that. Anytime because you don't have this happy clause there. Anytime you change the use, that terminates the prior use, and if you want to resume a prior use, you have to go through whatever approval process and requirements apply. The arguments that Attorney Walker has set forth simply have no application to the situation here. And I ask the board to deny the appeal and uphold the Director of Planning Development's decision. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions for Attorney Murray?
Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak in opposition? Anyone else like to speak in favor of the application to overturn Mr. Sullivan's decision? Please identify yourself, sir.
No, good evening. My name is Alex Hunt. I'm the current owner of the property. And I'd like everyone to understand and just reiterate the history of the property since its inception in 1963. Its uses throughout time, as well as the surrounding area. There is virtually no residential, houses in the area to speak of. And I also want everyone to understand that my current use, I'm zoned to run a 12-cylinder chipper or 85cc chainsaw 24 hours a day, should I choose. Okay, which in my opinion is far more intense, potentially, than Mr. Nicastro's proposed use. And so I want everyone just to please think about that when they're considering their vote. Does anyone have any questions?
Questions? Thank you very much. Anyone else like to speak either in favor or against? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and let's discuss it amongst ourselves. How do we want to proceed here?
I'd like to make a motion to uphold the town planning administrator's decision in that when April 19th, 2016, the planning board approved a site plan for this location, that they sunset the previous operation, and that further this is, the planner's indication is that the use becomes less non-conforming, and that is the goal of the ordinance.
Other comments?
That was a motion, right?
Maybe we
What
should put that into
stems?
the form of a motion. That would be
I made it a motion.
Well, you had a lot of
That's my motion.
the whole thing. Do you have that, Robin? I'm only concerned about the administrative part, not the substance.
It's on the tape.
The motion was made to deny the appeal. And then there were reasons for that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Then the motion is to deny. I'll second the motion.
All right, any further discussion?
I'd welcome any added reasons.
Don't really need any.
It's on the tape.
Right, okay, go ahead, please.
Louder.
I would suggest that you would just, why don't you withdraw the motion as you made it, and then say it again in a simple, make a motion that we deny the appeal of the planners.
But she has what you said.
She has what you said in the minutes.
I'd make them, I don't want to withdraw the whole thing. I simply put a period after. I would make a motion to deny the request. Make a motion to deny the request for...
First, you have to withdraw.
You have to withdraw the first one, otherwise we have two motions on the floor.
Just put a period after where I made the motion to deny the crest, and then put the reasons afterwards.
That would not be a legal motion, because you then have a substantive text following the statement of the motion, and who's to know what's the motion? So would it not be simpler to say, I move that we deny the appeal of the administrative decision, period?
Period.
And then the record will reflect,
And then-
the record will reflect the
Then
reasons that
reflect the
you...
reasons.
Okay.
But you need to withdraw your initial motion.
So you still have to withdraw it.
Okay. I'll withdraw it and rephrase it. I simply would make the motion to deny the request, for, wherever I was,
Hearing?
for the application of case 02 AAD 17 lot 148-110, and uphold the town planner's administrative decision. Period.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second it.
Any further discussion?
Do we have a legal discussion on the motion?
Yes, discussion on the motion.
Right now,
Pardon?
right now.
Do we have a legal opinion on the sunset provision versus our ordinance, as was argued out here?
We do not.
Well, how can we make a judgment?
Should we?
No,
The zoning was clear. Wait a minute.
I don't think,
It's a sunset case, isn't it? The applicant's asking to go back to the old auto body, which was there for years. Others are saying, no, it was gone away when the new applicant.
There's a motion.
Board granted a new site plan review that
yeah.
old use went away and the new use started.
My question. Legal opinion.
That's what the board has been discussing with the applicant and among ourselves, whether or not the old use went away. And it appears that there's a consensus among the board, at least there seems to have been a consensus among the board, that the old use had gone away. And in case of the new use existing, wanting to go back to the old use couldn't be done, and therefore the AAD needs to be upheld.
That was being discussed as a factual issue, not as a legal issue. Now, the question I think you're raising, Hank, is does the planning board's approval of a new use, a less non-conforming use, and the actual exercise of that less non-conforming use constitute a legal basis for saying that that abandoned the original 50-year?
There's a one-year grandfather, and it's still within the 1 year, or the prior.
Only if you forget all about that change of use.
I understand, but that's where I'm looking for the legal support.
Can we move the question?
I think we're still in discussion. It's in second, and we're discussing the motion.
I think you have to look at the logical ramification of continuous, if you had,
We've always allowed them to fully participate and just not vote.
But we are now in the process of voting. He has a point.
Okay. So Hank, what I hear you saying is that we should put this on hold until we get a legal opinion on that.
You need, yeah, on the sunset.
I disagree, Hank. I strongly disagree. I think this board has the competence to make a decision on this basis. If we've made a decision which is faulty in law, the applicant will take us to Superior Court and argue that case. But if we have to have recourse to legal opinion every time a case is brought before us because we're unsure of where we stand, this board then becomes neutered. It has no effect whatsoever.
But there's the 1 year is described in the ordinance, no discussion about some sunset or another less demanding or less item takes over.
We have two differing opinions.
Yeah.
Your concern is the applicant's concern, and the other concern is the concern that Sarah raised, that Suzanne raised, that I raised, I believe Chris raised also, that an old use given up voluntarily in favor of a new use cannot be reverted back to when the new use is found not to be economically viable. And there's a difference of opinion. It's not a matter of law, or it may be a matter of law. Not being a lawyer, I can't say. It may be a matter of law, but I think this board is competent enough to decide that it's ourselves. If we are found to be incorrect in law, someone will come along and yell at us. That's what the appeal process is for.
Okay, well, any further
Or
discussion?
abstain, either way.
Any further discussion? Thank you, Hank. All right, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of denying the appeal of Planner Sullivan's decision, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Did you vote?
A pass.
I vote yes.
Pass.
You're going to abstain? Okay, so the motion is carried for, no one against, but one abstention. Okay. Now we go on to the second item on the agenda.
This case is tax map number 148-10. It's case number 03-V-17. The applicant is Salvatore Nicastro and Peg Leg Realty, LLC. This is a request for a variance to allow for an automobile repair facility with limited automobile sales, coupled with an existing permitted use of retail sales and repair of outdoor equipment, but in a limited and secondary capacity. Properties at 486 Center Street, and a site visit was held earlier this evening.
Mr. Walker, I think you're up again.
With pleasure. So the purpose of the variance application is to permit the applicant to operate an automobile repair facility similar to the existing facility that's operated next door, but without any gasoline sales, and with limited automobile sales, and to continue the permitted use that the planning board has already approved, but on a much more limited scale. Again, the building's limited in size. It only has 2 bays. You can only get a certain amount of either vehicles or small engines through the door. So we're not trying to increase the intensity of the use, but just have a variety of uses. And I want to make the pitch that I see more and more businesses in town needing to expand their usage. You know, the building next door to mine, downtown, the Yum Yum Shop's been a bakery for 50 years, but they had to bring a restaurant in. And a lot of businesses are having to expand and do multiple things and able to make ends meet. For Sal to operate next door, he needs income from 2 sources, from gas and from automobile repair facility. It's going to be losing the gasoline, needs to make up that revenue somewhere else, trying to do that in a couple other areas. And I think that in our small town, we need to pay attention to that. Getting to the test directly, number one, the variance will not be contrary to the public interest, because it's noted in our handbook, for a variance to be contrary to the public interest, it must unduly and to a marked degree violate the basic zoning objectives of the zoning ordinance. And to determine this, the handbook suggests that you ask yourself a quintessential question, and that is whether the variance will alter the essential character of the neighborhood or threaten the health, safety, or general welfare of the public. And I submit that the answer to both those questions is no, it will not alter the essential character of the community, and no, it will not endanger the health, safety, or welfare of the public. Now, from a historical perspective, This property has been exclusively used for commercial purposes for over 50 years, and since at least 1963, before most of you were born. Now, in February of last year, Rob Hausman issued a letter, which we touched on earlier, but I'll touch on it again, and he made 3 bulleted points which are in the application. The first is that in 1993, this is 24 years ago, the then code enforcement officer concluded that the use of the property as a vehicle maintenance repair facility was a lawfully existing non-conforming use. 2, that lawfully existing non-conforming use had continued on site and remained active within the last year, right up until 2016. And then 3, the current use automobile repair facility, including a body shop, is a lawfully existing non-conforming use. Now, just to be clear again, we're not trying to have an auto body shop on this site at all, but we do want to do automobile repair, much like Sal does right now. The subject building was constructed exclusively as a commercial property. It's not susceptible to residential use, and in fact, it has never in 50 years been used residentially, despite the fact that it's in a residential zone. Additionally, this property is on a high traffic count, busy state highway. The speed limit out there is 50 miles an hour. It's not an area that's conducive to residential use, despite the fact that it's located in a residential zone, and I suspect will never be used for residential purposes. Additionally, this property is surrounded by commercial property. You go half a mile to the south or west towards Wolfeboro, go half a mile in the other direction, north and east towards Ossipee, you're going to see commercial property after commercial property, or at least non-residential property. And let me just run through those. If you start at this building, you head towards Ossipee, the next building is a house. It's owned by somebody in Raymond. I don't know who they are. I don't believe they're here this evening, but there is a residential house to the right of this property. You keep going up Route 28, the Bittersweet Restaurant, which is now abandoned. That's been a commercial property forever. The next building up is Bly's Ice Cream and Farm Stand. You go up a little bit further, you have an entrance to the Wolfeboro Tennis Club, which is behind Bly's. 4 tennis courts are back there. Property to the right is Lord's Funeral Home. Again, none of these are residential properties, except for that one house. Then we have Allen's Furniture. And then we have the old New Hampshire Pewter Building, which is now Dr. Clark's office. And then we have the 7-Eleven, variety store and gasoline station. You go a little bit further, you have Calico Graphics. Come across the street where Imacom used to be, and you have Matt Krause and Bill Krause's CPA firm. Come back towards town now on that side of the street. There's a house right there near the pond. That's a second house. Come a little farther, there's a commercial building that Rick Currian uses for storage. And you have Bartlett Tree, which is commercial. And you have Auto Care, which is a much bigger operation than what Sal proposes. He's trying to do somewhat that type of operation, but on a mini scale, because he only has 2 bays. I think that building has 10 bays, 5 in the front and 5 in the back. Then you have the self-storage building, the yoga studio, electric vehicle building in that out front. Then you have the UPS building. Then we get to the Kingswood. Then we get to All About Kitchens. That building is clearly not residential. And then the Kingswood Youth Center, not residential. Then you have the church. And then you have Campbell's Books. It's like a house, but it always seems to have some business purposes there, particularly in the good weather. And then directly across the street in this property's front yard, you have a commercial zone, which has 3 commercial properties. Westlake Asian Cuisine, Easton Topographics, Heckman's Flooring. You go a little closer to town, and then you have the 60-room Allen A Resort, clearly not a residential property. And then we have the Boat Museum. Jump across the street there, you have Country Cabins. The last 2, by the way, were owned by Everett Albee. Then you have the Nick, which this board granted a variance on several years ago, over a decade ago, which was a great variance and a great property, and it's one that we all can be proud of. You come a little closer, we have the 1810 house, which this board again granted a variance on last year to permit a winery in there. Neither one of those being residential uses. That's had an antique business there for a number of years as well. It was a bed and breakfast. Buildings out back. come up next to this building, there's a driveway that goes to the left of this building. You go down that driveway to the left was Everett Albee's construction business. For 50 years, behind the 1810 house out in the woods back there, you had a gravel pit that probably had 20 to 50 vehicles in it, most of them dump trucks, bulldozers, excavators, heavy equipment. You also had an inspection station back there. Everett died last year, so that is not an existing use, and now we don't have any place for our heavy truckers to get their vehicles inspected, and they all leave town as a result. You continue up that road. Up in the back, there is a house that the Leipolds own, and that's the third house of roughly 28 properties. There's 3 residential uses, roughly half a mile to the Ospey side, half a mile to town. So this is really a commercial district in all but name. It's commercial, that's commercial, non-residential in any event. So to permit the uses that we're asking this evening will not alter the essential character of this neighborhood, which is commercial south, commercial north. And again, it's the old saying, location, location, location. There aren't many people that want to have a residence on a state highway, a busy state highway with a high traffic count with a speed limit 50 miles an hour. Proposed use will also have no impact on municipal services. It is not going to use the town water, sewer, nor school system being commercial in nature. Essentially, what we're asking for is to have Sal move his existing business next door out of the downtown area, which I think is to the public's benefit, and put it out on another state highway, but farther removed from town in a more innocuous location. We'll continue to generate competition for this type of service, which is dwindling in our area. Fewer and fewer people that are fixing vehicles in our area, but competition's good, keeps prices down, and he would like to continue to perform and provide that service to the community, albeit in a different location. From another perspective, he would like to sell a few cars to make a little bit of extra money. Now, the only place that you can buy a car in Wolfeboro right at the moment is Auto Care. Clearly not a booming business. You don't see a lot of traffic going in and out to buy cars. And at the scale that Sal is asking for, which would be a maximum of 8, it would not be a booming, high-intense business, but it would be a way that he could make a little bit of extra money, particularly when he repairs cars. People sometimes don't want them. They'll say, well, you can just have the car, and he often will fix it and make a little extra money. Again, competition, albeit small, is helpful. The alternative is we all leave town to buy a vehicle. Finally, this property is currently approved for small engine sales and repair, and he'd like to continue that, but in a much smaller capacity in that wing on the right side of the building if you stand in the street, to have people be able to have their lawnmowers and snow blowers fixed in there. Wolfeboro has no place to do that, zero. Again, it's a business that's dying. Wolfeboro Power Equipment, after decades of use on Bay Street, closed. Didn't make a profit in the last 10 years. They finally closed. KT Power, which was in the Auto Care building, actually in the Chrysler building, which is now Bartlett Tree, similarly tried to sell small engine lawnmowers, chainsaws, that kind of thing, do some repairs. It lasted 1.5 seasons. The K was for Kinville and the T was for Trites, because they tried to, even in their business, make a little extra money by doing it on the side, and Tom Trites couldn't make it, and he closed and sold off. And then the existing business that Alex tried to run this summer. You know, he's got a thriving hardware store business downtown. Thought he could expand it out at this building. After 3 months, it didn't prove to be financially viable, and that's why it closed. So Sal's trying to provide that use as well, albeit on a smaller scale than what's currently approved. So actually, we're trying to take that approved use and actually shrink it down to just use that one far bay. The other bay, the main bay that you saw when you went out to the site, he would continue to just do what he does right now, except he has 2 bays here. He's going to go down to just one is the plan at that building. So for all of those reasons, we believe it would not be contrary to the public interest and would not in any way jeopardize the health, safety, or welfare of the community. Number 2, the spirit of the ordinance is observed. Again, the handbook suggests that one way to look at the The spirit of the ordinance test is whether it would alter the essential character of the community. I've suggested that it would not already. Another approach the handbook suggests is to see whether granting the variance would threaten the health, safety, and welfare of the community, and we have not had any abutters speak against this, haven't had any speak in favor of it, but it suggests that it would not alter the health, safety, or welfare, since the existing use that Sal has in another location in town is just going to move to a different area. I don't think it's suggested that where he's operating right now in any way endangers the public health, safety, or welfare. Somewhat perplexingly, an automobile repair facility is not a permitted use in the town of Wolfeboro anywhere. Believe that's an error because under the parking regulations, there's a provision for parking for an automobile repair facility, but that use got dropped out somewhere along the way. So legally, you can't have an auto repair facility anywhere. This property, however, is uniquely situated. It's been used as an automobile repair facility from 1963 right up through and to 2016. So we believe that, according to the spirit of the ordinance, we live in a mobile society, a rural community. We don't have public transportation. We need vehicles, and we need those vehicles to be repaired. The alternative is that Sal leaves Wolfeboro, goes to another community to their benefit, to Wolfeboro's detriment, and I don't think that's a good idea and not consistent with the spirit of our ordinance. 3, that substantial justice would be done, and this is a balancing test where the test is whether any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by gain to the general public would be an injustice. And again, it's a balancing test, and the benefit to the applicant's pretty clear. He'd like to continue to use his property for commercial uses, or a property that's consistently been used for commercial uses and historic purposes, to just resurrect those uses. That the current owner, but for the current owner's sort of hiccup this summer, we wouldn't even be here today asking for the variance because they just could have continued on with the automobile repair facility use. Our prior town planner, John Krebs, in September 14th letter about 5 or 6 months ago opined that, and I have a quote in the application, that I just reviewed the file and that the change of use from an auto body facility to an equipment sales, storage, rental, and repair facility for your property was approved. He goes on to say that I reviewed Wolfeboro site plan review regulations and find nothing that would trigger site plan approval in order to change the use from what it was to repair and limited sales of automobiles, provided 2 things. One was that the building didn't change, and it isn't going to in any way, and that there was no outside changes, and it wasn't, and they aren't going to change in any way. So in short, he didn't feel there was a necessity for either a variance or planning board approvals. Now, in fairness, he did amend that opinion about a week later, rethought it, and suggested, yes, you have to go back for a variance. So 5 months later, seeing that deadline come along, or at least what we thought might have been a deadline, here we are. But of greater importance, that the property has been used as an automobile repair facility and an auto body shop for over 50 years. And the applicant simply wants to continue one, not 2, but 1 of those uses, and simply want to add in very limited auto sales, which is much less intensive than an auto body shop. You have cars coming and going with the paints and all those issues that you might deal with. So, in summary, on this point, we don't believe there's any detriment to the general public whatsoever, and substantial justice would be done if Sal could continue to provide the valuable services which he has been providing, coupled with other needed services like small engine repair that Wolfeboro needs, but has no one else providing that service in the community. Number 4, that the value of surrounding properties will not be diminished. Well, again, this property has been used as a commercial property since 1963 and will continue to be used for commercial purposes. Said property was not designed for residential use, and given the investment that the current owner has in the property, it is highly unlikely that anybody would pay the money that's being asked and try to use it for residential purposes. It's just not financially feasible. The building, as I noted earlier, is surrounded by commercial properties already. It faces 3 commercial properties and faces a commercial zone. There's the Westlake Asian Restaurant, Heckman's Flooring, and Eastern Topographics. So we don't believe there'll be any diminution in value of surrounding properties whatsoever, given that this has historically been used as a commercial property and will continue to be used as a commercial property. And the last part of the task, where the little enforcement of the provisions of the ordinance would result in an unnecessary hardship because of special conditions that distinguish this property from others. I think this property is unique. It's the only one in town that has been used historically as an automobile repair facility, was converted to a more conforming but still non-compliant use, but just within a year was converted to something else. And again, but for that hiccup, we wouldn't even be here today. But it's a property that we're all used to driving by, seeing as a commercial property. And basically, if you drive by, if we could have just stopped a year ago and come back, you wouldn't notice a difference to the outside. Under A, those special conditions distinguish it from other properties, suggest that there would be no fair and substantial relationship between the purpose of the ordinance applicable to the application and the specific application. And again, the currently approved use is a grandfathered, non-conforming use that proved to be not financially viable. And that's important, and that's why it closed. The ordinance encourages new uses to be more conforming, which both Christine and Suzanne suggested earlier. But given this property's location on a busy state highway, it's not going to be used as a residential property. It's structural design. It's a box with a flat roof. I've never seen anybody in Wolfeboro build a house with a flat roof. There's only a few commercial properties in our area that even have flat roofs. So the building itself does not lend itself to residential use. And the value of it suggests, again, that it can't be used for residential purposes. No one's going to pay the kind of money that is legitimately being asked for it and use it as a house when there's much more other viable uses in the area. So therefore, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the purpose of the ordinance and this specific property, given its unique history. This test also suggests that we balance the public good resulting against any public harm to a private landowner. And again, I don't believe we have any abutters that are objecting. Simply trying to take an existing use in town and moving it to another location for the benefit of the public good. And finally, the ordinance permits non-conforming uses to continue. And although we might have had that hiccup, which resulted in the denial of the administrative appeal for a variance, I think you can take that into consideration. Again, the 50 years of use on this property that's a long, long use, and the applicant simply wants to be allowed to continue that historic use of the property. And then the second half of that is the proposed use is a reasonable one because the existing use is commercial, the proposed use is commercial. Proposed use is reasonable, again, because this facility has been operated, I'll say it probably 10 times from 1963 to 2016, and it's compatible with other surrounding uses in the area. And it would not alter, therefore, the essential character of the community, which is what the real test, I think, for a variance is. I don't usually make an A and a B argument. I usually just make one or the other, but I'm going to make the second one as well. And that is that the subject property is located in a residential zone. But given the special conditions of both the building and the historic use, it cannot reasonably, the key word there being reasonably, be used for residential purposes. In conformance with the ordinance for all the reasons that I articulated. Practically, the building isn't going to be used for residential purposes, and you're not seeing anybody build any new homes in that area, just not practical for that. So I don't believe that it can be used in strict compliance with the ordinance, or reasonably so, and we therefore request that you grant the variance to allow this property to be used for what it's historically been used for, with some very limited automobile sales, again, a cap of 8, and if you were inclined to grant this, we would expect that cap to be put on, and that it also be the permitted use. We plan on reducing that in scope to just one bay, 600 square feet or less, but that would be a planning board issue for you. So that's the request. I'd be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Mr. Walker?
congratulate you on your accurate visual memory. That was quite a good recitation of what is to be found along Center Street from spot to spot.
Well, you're too kind, but I drive by it every day for 33 years, so I sort of have it committed to memory.
I also thank you for that, though. What I like to characterize as a wise admonition in the final paragraph of your argumentation. Something I'd like the board to take particular notice of. I have no questions, Mr. Chairman.
I have just a comment because although Randy was very accurate in his description of all the places he drives by, I just want to point out again that the majority of them are in a different zoning district. They're in the Center Street, Route 28 mixed-use business district. So, just keep that in mind. You're kind of combining things that aren't really combined.
I was definitely combining them. You're absolutely right to bring that up. It was really just to not really draw a line where the zone is, but just, again, the character of the neighborhood. The zoning ordinance doesn't describe neighborhoods particularly, but that stretch, regardless of what the zone is called, both sides of it and directly across the street are commercial.
And I think that's the problem that occurred and why it took how many years to rezone that district, because most of the things in there have been included by a variance, so that entire area tends to be one variance after another, and that's why I keep referring back to the purpose of the different zones in that domain.
Other questions for Mr. Walker? Thank you. Anyone wish to speak in opposition to the granting of the variance?
Again, my name is Roger Murray, and I'm representing the Wentworth Watershed Association. I would just briefly like to disagree with Attorney Walker's characterization of the neighborhood. It's our position that that is not just a commercial area. While he did identify many properties, he did not include Allen Road, which is clearly residential. He climbed Mount Everett to get to the Leopold property, but he didn't mention Square Hill, all the residential properties on Lake Wentworth. And when you look at many of the uses out there, such as the church, the boat museum, those were uses permitted by special exception and not by variance. Having said that, we fully appreciate the fact that this building, this property, is not suitable for residential use. I mean, our concern, and the reason I'm here tonight, is because of the number of uses that are proposed on this property, which is 0.59 acres in size, and along the back of the property, there's a wetland, and there are also two stormwater treatment areas on either in the left and right back corners, which impact the property. What will the impact of all these uses on that be, which would go to the two of the criteria, whether the variance is not contrary to the public interest, and also whether there's, number three, whether granting of the variance will do substantial justice. The use of car sales, particularly 8-car sales, is not an historical use of the property. It's not been something out there. You've not driven by and seen cars on display, and that has a potential effect on the public interest, substantial justice, and also surrounding property values. In terms of whether the spirit of the ordinance is observed, there presently is an approved use of the property, which is commercial for retail sales and rental center for outdoor equipment. This is a non-conforming use, and the proposal is to add an automobile repair facility and automobile sales, both of which are not permitted uses. Right now, the only use permitted is the existing non-conforming use. And one of the purposes of zoning, as has been pointed out, is to limit the enlargement and extension of non-conforming uses. And when you look at the ordinance, in fact, that one-year provision, which was discussed earlier, is in furtherance of that. So this proposal does the opposite of that. In terms of parking, and I realize some of this would be the subject of planning board site review, but there is the question, for the current use, there are 14 parking spaces on the property. That's based on one per 300 square feet for small engine. If you start selling cars, sell 8 vehicles, does that make it a dealership? In which case you'd have 1 per 300 gross square feet of gross floor area and 2 per bay, of which there are 2, and 1,200 square feet, 1 space per square, 1,200 square feet for outside display. And my concern is, can this site support that without having a negative effect on the wetlands, and all of this eventually, whether it goes into Hershey Brook, ends up in Lake Wentworth, and also ends up next to the town's Allen Beach. It addresses the impact on the neighborhood and on the abutters. In terms of unnecessary hardship, the applicant makes the argument this can only be a commercial property. Well, it has a current commercial use on the property, and maybe it was open for 3 months, and we go through a history of Wolfeboro Power of Equipment, which existed for years and years and years. I can take you back to when Peter Brewer ran it, when Dewey ran it, and they did it successfully. There is a presently approved commercial use. The property was constructed, according to the applicant, as an auto repair facility, but he's not asking to just go back to that historical use. He wants to add the auto repairs, the auto sales, and the small engine component. And right now, the small engine component is approved for the use of the property. It's not approved along with something else. So he doesn't want to just go back to the historical use. He wants to return to that use plus 2 others. So it is our hope that when you consider this variance, that you do look at the number of proposed uses and the potential impact that they may have. Thank you.
Roger, are you arguing that the applicant should remain in his business on that site, whether or not he loses money time after time, as Wolfeboro Power seems to have done for years and years and years?
I'm not arguing that he has to stay there at all. He can, I was inside the building. It's really nice inside, and I think he did a lot of work on it. I'm not arguing that he has to stay there, but can it be sold to someone else who can run that business, or is there a similar or less intensive use? Or maybe I'd have a tough time arguing that an auto repair facility out there, given the past history, is an unreasonable request. But issue is he wants 3 things. And the question is that too many for the property?
Would you also agree, or would you agree that this board acts as a zoning safety valve for the community, where an individual finds himself up against a zoning restriction, which if he can show it to be incurring hardship and qualifying in the other categories as required, he can ask for and hope to gain a variance?
Well, the hardship is not the circumstances of the owner, but something that's inherent in the land and the financial condition.
It's inherent in the property, agreed. I won't argue the fine points, but you get my point. Would you agree that this board's job is to offer relief where appropriate?
That is the purpose of the Board of Adjustment, but it's not to simply, you need to look at the criteria and do they meet the criteria.
Agreed, and that's why we're in this proceeding now. Thank you.
Are you opposing the entire application or
No.
just parts of it? Just the sales,
Just
the auto
the
sales part?
extent of what is requested.
Thank you. Other comments? Gentleman in the back? No, you're all set, okay. Anyone else wish to speak in opposition? Mr. Walker, would you like to rebut anything that's been said? Or would you like to stand on what you said?
I believe Alex wants to say something as well, but don't necessarily need to rebut, because I think Roger agreed with a lot of the things that we said. That there have been variances granted in the area and special exceptions granted in the area. We don't have any abutters. Any of the abutters are not objecting this evening at all. And And I think that the thrust of the Lake Wentworth's not really aggressive objection is that it was the impact. They're concerned about the impact. And if I could just sort of reinforce the fact there's only 2 bays in this building. Sal has 2 bays where he is. And you can only get so many cars in and out of 2 bays or small engines. You're limited by the number of bays. Auto Care has got 5 in the front, I think, and 5 in the back, so their use naturally is going to be a lot more. And as I mentioned at the very beginning, I see more and more businesses in town needing to expand a little bit their use, not the intensity, but just to literally have 40 hours you can actually work. If you just did small engine repair, you might only be able to do those 15 hours a week. You do auto salesman, you can only do that 5 hours a week. But you get enough little pieces, and you can make 40 hours of a whole, is sort of the argument that I'm making. Again, he only has 2 bays, trying to make a living on 2 bays and provide services that we just don't have. We've lost the small engine repair. So I don't think the impact is going to be all that significant from what in the past you just will see less automobile repair work and maybe a little bit more small engine than what he's doing currently, because again, he has to make up his revenue where he loses on the gasoline sales. Let me just see if I had any other comments here. I think that pretty much covers it, but again, we'd be more than happy to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Hunt?
Again, my name is Alex Hunt, owner of the building. In regard to Roger's concern regarding watershed, prior to May of last year, there was no stormwater treatment on the lot whatsoever. And at the request of the planning, or the requirement of the planning board, I had to have a stormwater drainage swale professionally engineered as well as professionally installed to prevent against such concerns that Mr. Murray has. So I'd like you all to recommend or consider that when making your decision. In regard to Sal's request for 8 automobiles, I currently have 8 trailers, 3 excavators, 3 tractors, a Bobcat, 2 chippers, and 3 man lifts that I can legally park on the lot. And the lot does support it. And so I want you to consider that as well, that we fit substantially more than that on the lot without a problem, legally. So, thank you.
I also mentioned to the board that the owner prior to Alex was actually selling cars off that lot. A number of the cars that he had parked in the front were for sale. They just didn't have signs on them, but if you talked to him, they were for sale. So, didn't have a permit. Okay. Surprise.
Any other questions? All right, I'll close. I'm sorry, Mr. Walker, one more.
The improvements which Alex described, which I think are a vast improvement, are they all going to remain in place? Is the drainage, no further paving, the parking area going to be the same size?
Aren't these questions best answered by the applicant when he comes before, if he does come before the planning board for site plan review?
We'd be happy to do it there, but again, I think we've represented in our application. We don't plan any changes to the building itself or the outside. What you see structurally is Alex has already spent significant dollars improving that property, and the intent by Sal, presuming he gets your approval, would not be to change the outside at all.
So you're saying that you wouldn't pave over the stormwater management
Glad you brought
area?
that up. No plans to change anything on the outside at all, unless the planning board requires something more if we get that far, but the plan is not to take anything away. We like what we see, and I think Alex has done a good job, just want to change the use a little bit. If I could just ask the board one question. You were clearly getting ready to terminate public debate here and input, but you haven't asked a lot of questions yet. And I always find it frustrating if you cut it off and then you have that discussion, and from the audience here, you always want to say, well, wait a minute, I could have addressed that. Is there any questions that you do have that you haven't posed?
Occasionally, we do find people make thorough presentations. Occasionally. All right, I'll close the public hearing. Comments? Let's discuss it.
my concern is the intensity of the use on the site, giving the multitude of uses, being small engine repair, small engine sales, auto repair, and auto sales. That's quite a lot to put on that small site. And I would not be opposed to defining what auto repair is, but I am opposed to auto sales. That's not even in the ballpark for me. It's nowhere near anything that the ordinance suggests that would be allowed, even in a special exception.
Well, he's here because the ordinance doesn't allow him to do anything.
I understand that, Michael.
Not just say.
I fully understand what
Okay.
we sit here for, but we also can modify and
need another
amend
reason.
what the requirements are. And if I was to vote yes on this, I would say, with the exception of auto sales. We can put conditions, we can make amendments, and my amendment would be if someone was to vote to move to approve this as requested, I would be making a motion to amend it to take out auto sales.
I think it's unsafe to start getting involved in somebody else's business plan when
Well,
we're...
that's your opinion.
May I finish? When we're not really competent to judge whether or not that plan is the one that works for that property.
That's our job, Michael, to
No,
try
our
and
job is
figure
not
out-
to second-guess someone else's business plan. Our job is to apply the 5 criteria to an application. That's all of our job.
Maybe we should start with that.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. Thank you, Chris. You want to go through the criteria?
Let's go to the criteria.
All right. I'll start with numbers 1 and 2, combine those as we have been advised to by the courts. Variance contrary to the public interest and spirit of the ordinance is observed, and I look at the public health and safety, and I remind myself that this has been an auto body repair shop since 1963 approximately, and with a short hiatus for over 50 years, half a century of activity of the same sort on the same site in the same neighborhood. And I have to come to the conclusion that since I've not seen any additional fire engines running down the road, there haven't been some terrible spills out there, I've not seen crashes, and I've not heard any complaints tonight, especially from the abutters, that there's no issue of public health and safety. So I would find in both cases for the applicant on questions numbers 1 and 2.
I'm glad that they're not including the auto body component, because that was my concern. You know, you have crashed engines with oil spills, solvents, paints, all of that. So I just want to point that out, that I think that's an improvement.
I would disagree and say that auto sales does alter the character of the neighborhood. Auto sales has never been part of that operation, and I feel that it frustrates the ordinance and it impacts the site, so I cannot agree to number 1.
How about number 2?
28 years in household hazardous waste. I just have to correct Christine, because when they're doing auto repairs, they use lots of solvents that can cause permanent nerve damage if you put your hands in them, and there are a lot of other hazardous waste fluids that are in automobiles that are above and beyond just paint.
But hopefully they'd be inside, not outside, draining onto the ground.
Other comments on number 1 or number 2? Substantial justice is done.
I find substantial justice would be, if I may continue, since I took the lead here, in this case, the strict application or application of the ordinance in a strict fashion by the town gains itself strict adherence to a situation which has clearly changed on the ground and needs to be addressed by the planning board at some future date. The neighborhood within the zoning districts that are concerned tonight, that we're concerned with tonight, has changed. If we deny the applicant his ability to use, or the ability to use the site the way it has been used for the last half century, the town gains strict adherence to the ordinance. The applicant loses the ability to continue with the use which had been working for the last half century. I think in this case, it's pretty clear that substantial justice would be done were the application to be approved.
Other comments on substantial justice?
I would disagree. This is not the way that site has been used for decades. This is an expansion of that use, and that expansion includes auto sales. And those cars will be sitting out on the lot. As you can see down the street, there's a lot of them sitting there, and they sit there for a good long time. You're worried about stuff leaking? Well, it could be leaking right out of those cars that are sitting there for sale. Typically, auto sales is not one of the high-end types of things you like to see in a residential zone. So I just do not support the auto repair, the auto sales in any way, shape, or form.
Other comments?
Oh, by the way, on number 3, they do mention that the only changes to the building would be the overhead doors to allow automobiles to go in and out. So they are making outside change.
Four, value of surrounding properties will not be diminished.
Having heard no testimony to the contrary, one has to rely upon one's own understanding of the property and the neighboring properties. I've been here since '84. There's always been some kind of auto repair facility in that spot. I haven't seen a lot of for sale signs popped up around because of the existence of that facility. I haven't heard talk of a blight in property values in that particular area because of a facility of that sort, so I have to assume they would not be diminished.
Any other comments? And number 5, literal enforcement.
Shall I continue?
Sure.
The special conditions of this property, I think, arise out of the fact that it has been for half a century an automobile repair facility. For a short time it stopped. Technically, it was no longer an automobile repair facility, which was the reason why I had to argue to uphold the AAD, or to deny the application to overturn the AAD. But I think in this case, hardship does exist for the applicant. He wants to return to an historical use of the land. The ordinance is in his way. I think that creates the hardship.
Other comments?
I do agree that it really is, it would be very hard to think of it reverting to a residential use. So I do think that there is a hardship there.
Sarah?
I think that the building has, and the entire lot actually, was substantially improved under the last owner. And I know it's always been a business in there. I just wonder if there's some other business that could go in there. It looks at this point like it could be easily converted maybe to an office building. I don't think just because it was an auto repair, it can only exist as an auto repair. And I do see that, you know, putting that sales is expansion of a we can't make a decision on zoning based on a hardship, based on because someone has a financial hardship. That's not the basis for what
Suzanne?
Yeah, I'd simply say, as I have been saying throughout, that the ordinance in of itself encourages new uses, but they encourage them to be more conforming. This is not more conforming, it's less conforming. And by giving the variance, it will be an action of zoning by variance, another one on that route. And we're going down the downhill side instead of the uphill positive side. So I will not support this application.
Other comments? Shall we have a motion?
Sure. Beg pardon. I'll be happy to make a motion. I move that the board approve case number, beg pardon, 03-V-17, tax map 148-10, applicant Salvatore Nicastro and Peg Leg Realty LLC, to allow for, and I'll quote this from the notice, an automobile repair facility with limited automobile sales coupled with existing permitted use of retail sales and repair of outdoor equipment, but in a limited and secondary capacity, with the following conditions as outlined in our planner's review and incorporated by reference here, numbers 1 through 5.
Could I ask to add perhaps another condition of approval, which would be to maintain the stormwater improvements? Is that, I know that's really not our domain, but I would feel better if we had that in a condition. No?
I think we should leave that to the planning board. That would be my guess, because it's more in their purview. And given the fact that if we say preserve the currently existing stormwater management facilities, and the planning board then finds that given the use, more is required.
Right, no, I understand the wording.
I think
just
we ought
want
to leave
make
that to the
sure
planning board.
the point has been made. But since my planning board colleagues are here, I'm sure they got the message.
I think you will find the Department of Environmental Services will be right down there immediately if they do anything detrimental to that stormwater program.
So Christina, are you suggesting then that
She's withdrawing her motion.
Yeah, I'll withdraw my request for adding that as a condition, as long as it's been noted.
were you suggesting though that there be no further change in the facilities as they exist?
I mostly just want to make sure they don't repave the,
That's also
the
planning.
surfaces.
That's also planning board.
Second.
We're still discussing.
Yeah, we're discussing, but
discussing
it's
the
just
text of
been
the
made and
motion.
seconded, that's all.
Okay, I would like to see a clearer definition of, under the planner's review, small engine repair. Throughout the application, on both applications, it's talked about small power equipment. I think we should more clearly define what small engine repair is.
How do you propose to do that?
It was, pardon?
How do you propose to do that?
Well, just by saying, power equipment repair.
Repair of lawn and garden equipment?
Yeah, because that's basically what's currently, in fact, I don't know why we have to approve that, because that's a legal allowed use. The thing that they're asking to change is auto repair and auto sales.
Well, they're going for a variance, they're basically starting
Oh,
from
okay, yep, I get it.
ground zero.
Yep, that make them more compliant with the variance
and
rather than just.
I do think it's
grandfathered.
safer to
Yeah,
rely,
I get it.
well, I'll just finish anyway. I know you get it. To rely on the planner's recommendations, I'm assuming that the planner knows more about this stuff than I certainly do, and perhaps other members on this
Well,
board do.
I'm not suggesting that. What I'm suggesting is use the terminology that is in the application throughout, which was the existing use. I have to find it in one of the letters.
Outdoor equipment.
Which would be subsumed under small engine repair, one would assume, no?
Yeah, I don't think we should define or limit what that is, because, you know, I'm not conversant in the difference between the size of an engine of a wood chipper versus a leaf blower versus a lawnmower,
Yeah.
and I don't want to exclude something.
Small engine repair could end up being another motorcycle shop. That's a small engine.
Well, 750 cc
I'd
is
be
not
lot
really
more
a small engine, but nonetheless.
Putting in,
I don't think we can go do that, Suzanne. I don't think we have the expertise to come up with these sorts of definitions. We certainly haven't got the tools
We're gonna have
here.
some expertise somewhere along the line. Common sense tells you
He's
it's
right there.
garden equipment.
He's right there.
Why did you choose small engine repair and small engine sales? instead of the terminology that's used in the application and the history of what the planning board gave them permission to do.
Yeah, absolutely. I provided more flexible terminology here to allow for the board and the applicant to pare this down. This obviously was a list of conditions that I'm simply proposing to the board. I think that the board should explore whether or not it covers the proposed uses adequately, but I certainly don't have a definition prepared at this moment for these uses here, but I felt that they were all encompassing for the board to review right now.
So you would agree with me that these four characterizations, these four categories subsume the various sorts of small engines that might be prepared on this site? You feel comfortable with these four as covering the sorts of things that Sal wants to be doing on his site if this application is approved?
I do. I think it's perhaps of note.
Then I think I submit the board should rely on the confidence of the planner. That's why we have a paid staff.
I was
Not
just
try to
gonna,
reinvent the wheel here.
I was just gonna ask whether we should open the public hearing and allow,
No, I think that would be, everyone's got an idea of what a small engine is. I kind of think I know what a small engine is. I wouldn't consider a Harley Davidson to be a small engine under 750 cc, but maybe somebody else does. I think we're going to be opening an enormous can of worms by doing that. I think we should simply stick with the planner's suggestions. He feels confident in them, and I don't see why we shouldn't.
Well, let's do this then. Because the boilerplate 1 through 5 say all of the documentation submitted in this application package by the applicant and any required, blah, 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 that number 2. We do have a description that the planner wrote up, and that was operate an automobile repair facility without the sale of gasoline, limited automobile sales coupled with existing permitted uses of retail sale and repair of outdoor equipment, but in a manner much more limited as a secondary capacity. So since that's
What are you
written
referring
out,
to, Suzanne?
since it's written out, I'm gonna,
That was part of, that's my motion. That is my motion, and then I referred to the conditions as appearing in the planner's review. If those are,
that's not a condition, that is.
it's in the motion. If the motion passes, that's what they're held.
You read this verbatim
I read that verbatim.
on the notice of decision of the code officer.
Why don't we, no. What I read verbatim was from the notice, a butter public notice. That's what I read.
Okay, but
So Suzanne, is your question then that you'd like to
That is
amend the motion to exclude motorcycle sales and repair?
exclude motorcycle repair, sale of gasoline, and it will be limited auto sales.
I think limited is in there on auto sales.
I think they said 8.
That would be part of the conditions.
We're getting a little bit away
That's in the
from.
application.
No, let's,
They said 8. Well, you know, when somebody says this is what they're gonna limit it to, I think we have the right to hold them to that. And especially since we say all the documentation attached there too, so they've said it.
then all we need do is approve the motion that I made with the conditions suggested by the planner. The documentation is part of the public notice. They're also being held to all the documentation presented tonight. We're covered. We don't now have to parse any further or further do definitions, do we?
That's absolutely fine, Michael, as long as you recognize that tonight.
I think we do.
We're done.
do
we have a
we want
second?
to read back the motion so we all know what we're voting on?
Use the microphone, please.
Thank you, Robin.
The motion is to approve Variance to allow for an automobile repair facility with limited automobile sales, coupled with the existing permitted use of retail sales and repair of outdoor equipment, but in a limited and secondary capacity. It's inclusive of the planner's conditions and the planner review. Would you like me to review those for the record?
I don't see.
I didn't read all, I simply referred to them by reference.
That's correct.
Numbers 1 through 5.
I was just asking if you wanted me to put them out there.
I think it'd probably be good, let's to
Okay.
satisfy certain members of the board. Have
The
them 1
approval
through
is to
5.
allow for the conversion of a small engine repair and sales to the following uses. Small
No, we
engine-
don't have to read them, I beg your pardon.
Okay,
They're incorporated by reference.
that's correct. They're
Okay.
incorporated by reference.
And everybody who has a packet or the public document can figure out what they say, just like everybody else, and have to take our time reading them.
Correct.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Any further?
I'm not sure, did we ever have a second to that motion, Robin?
Seconded your motion.
Hank did, thank you.
Any further discussion? Okay, I'm going to call for a vote. All in favor of granting the variance, say aye.
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 Anyone opposed? Opposed. Okay, so it's 4-1. Thank you.
Wasn't too painful, was it?
We have one more item on the agenda, the consideration of the minutes.
If we'd have taken his sequence, we would have been done half hour sooner.
Oh, where are my minutes? Here they are.
We're reviewing the minutes of the regular meeting of February 6th. Any comments on the first page?
It's unclear about the sunset. And can you go back within a year
I have
to one
page 2.
before?
Hey, no comments on page 1. On page 2, any comments?
Yes, I have,
Gentlemen,
Ladies and gentlemen, could we please? You're welcome to stay and listen to the rest of it, or you're welcome to go on with your evening. One or the other, though, please. Thank you.
on page 2, the third paragraph up from the bottom that starts out with David Seneco. I think we should include the phrase "speaking from the audience" because he had stepped down, and I think we should clarify that he was not speaking from the table as a member of the board at that time.
good point.
Thank you.
Page are we on?
Page 2, the third paragraph on the bottom, Dave Seneco. And the last paragraph, it says, Sarah Silk questioned a suggestion, question number 4 by the town planner, which makes no sense. I believe I questioned suggested condition number 4 by the town planner. Well, it was relative to construction fencing
That's what you said.
set in the setback and buffer areas.
Anything else on page 2?
Did someone point out the Chris Franson paragraph perform is spelled preform?
Oh, yeah.
No, nobody mentioned.
I guess it could work.
Reform construction. Not what they need there.
Reform in a tight envelope. That's.
There is preform construction. It has to do with concrete, though.
I don't think that's what we intended. I think you're right.
Yeah.
Anything else on page 2?
I do.
Suzanne?
Yes, where it says Suzanne Ryan asked for the size of the garage. I also introduced a survey plan 8172 signed by the planning board, which shows a different location for the one-story frame house. There's no reference of it in the minutes. There's no reference of this being attached into the file.
So you want to add "and referred to"?
And Suzanne Ryan asked for the size of the garage and introduced a survey plan dated 8/1/72 and signed by the planning board, which shows a different location for the structure.
May I clarify a bit on this? The submitted plan was a plan of land, so it's not intended to accurately represent, to survey grade, the location of the house and the property. So if you choose to include this, I think that should be specified in the inclusion.
Well, just say, well, I've said a survey plan 8172. It speaks for itself, but I'm certainly willing to add, it
If you-
was a land survey plan.
Plan of land, yes.
Plan of land.
Yes.
Introduced a survey plan of land dated 8172, which shows a different location for the house, or for the structure, period.
Anything else on page 2?
And I don't care what they do with this, whether it goes in the file or goes to the master minutes, I don't care, but there needs to be a reference of anything that's documented and discussed
Give it to Matt. He will
to
have
the
it,
actual file.
and he will put it in the file. Page 3?
The fourth paragraph down, it starts with the board. The board reviewed and discussed the proposed application and discussed reopening the public hearing to clarify questions regarding the attached garage.
I think you're right.
Yeah, it would
So
have to
add
be, wouldn't it?
garage after attached.
Yep.
Anything else on page 3? Page 4? Anything on page 4? Page 5?
On the last paragraph, big paragraph that says Fred Tedeschi, I think we need to just note that it's Rudiger, Ruedigerh Grimm, and the New Hampshire Board of Examiners of Psychology and Mental Health Practice, because that case was actually about someone losing his license and having that appealed and being heard by the same board, which is totally different from crossover members and the zoning board, because the zoning board is allowed by law to hear their own appeals to their board.
Where are you reading? I don't,
Fred Tedeschi spoke to the issue, page 5, spoke to the issue regarding Mike Carter and noted the vote, and I just think we need to note that case so that,
It's the wrong citation for the case. What you're saying. It's not the Winslow case.
correct. The case that you handed, well, you gave it to me and then you forwarded it to me.
Yeah.
Yes.
so what are we changing?
I think we just need to say it was Ruediger, Rudiger H. Grimm case
Oh,
with the New Hampshire Board of Examiners of Psychology and Mental Health Practice, so that if someone wanted to look that up, they would know.
For the first sentence.
There were a lot of cases, a couple of cases, but the one that I found that says it's the vote that counts and not the discussion is the Grimm case. Probably was.
Sure,
Yeah.
you never
Go right
have too
ahead.
much information.
The more the merrier.
And getting back to that same paragraph, the second line, it says this and the right together.
Yes.
And then the part that starts with Mr. Hodder towards the end, I got kind of confused reading that. I think it needs to get reworked. I suggest maybe the first part could be Mr. Hodder and members of the board have disagreed, and at times, instead of he, Mr. Hodder is persuasive. But I didn't understand the noted sections, this section.
I know.
It's an awkward sentence with this noted section.
don't know
This
what
I
section
don't know what it
is,
means.
that's confused.
You want to just
Right.
delete it?
I think we delete it.
Delete from persuasive to the end?
Not persuasive.
So, yeah,
Unless if you re-listen to the tape, you can come up with something that made sense.
And the other question I had is the motion for rehearing is rejected on that ground as well, but I wasn't clear what the ground was.
And also Chris Franson made the motion and she seconded it on the paragraph.
You're versatile.
We thought Mike was persuasive.
Why don't we just delete from persuasive on to the end of that paragraph, and then all members voted in favor?
Yeah,
Then it's
I think
clear.
that's better.
Sounds good. Good doubt.
And would you review the tape to see who seconded the motion? Okay.
Yeah.
Does anyone remember if they did? Who seconded
Seconded the motion.
this motion?
I don't think they did.
No,
I don't think we had them video.
I don't think so.
I think,
I might have been.
At the mic said, yeah.
I think you did.
You can put me down as the second.
The board believes that Susan seconded the motion,
I'll take that.
in absence of testimony otherwise.
Okay. Page 6 are corrections. Any corrections to the corrections? I think the only one I had a question is on page 8, included 3 question marks shown incorrectly.
Page 8.
Sorry, page 6. I'm sorry, as you go down, page 6, the first correction on page 8.
What?
Oh, I got it.
I'm sorry, let's try that again.
Please.
Let's turn to page 6.
Got it,
Looking
okay.
at the top of the page,
Oh, thank you.
the second paragraph starts out with page 8.
Thank you.
And number 1 under that, it's 3 question
Yeah.
marks.
That's what was in the minutes.
That's why no one can read contracts you people write, you know.
And it turned out to be Glidden, as is noted in the following big paragraph. That's corrected there when she took it verbatim off the tape.
Okay.
Thank you. Anything else? Going once, going twice? I'm sorry.
Page 5, when Fred raised the issue regarding Mike Porter, my counterpart here, Christine, said something about, well, that seemed like a conspiracy. I take offense to that remark. I made the motion.
I wasn't talking about you, I was talking about the people, the presenters, not you. And it was their making it seem like, that we had illicit knowledge that nobody else knew. It was about them.
Well, I thank you, and I stand corrected. I mistook what you said. However, there was knowledge as to why he stepped down, and I would think that the board would have been made aware of what transpired, and we were kept in the dark, and I don't think that was right. I believe the town planner knew something, I believe maybe Fred knew something, and the board didn't know. And I think in the future,
I still don't know.
I think in the future, when there's a decision handed down by Mr. Owen, that the board should be made aware of what it was.
The decision by Mr. Owen being,
Well, I'm not gonna get into it, you know what it was.
Well, none of
there,
us.
there
did,
was,
so-
there was not,
Well, we didn't know, but we know now, it's public information, you just go and ask Mr. Owen.
I'm not sure what you're...
At the time,
Michael stepping down.
at the time, the only thing I was aware of is that I got an email from Mike saying that he was going to recuse himself as a courtesy to me as the chairman. That's all I'm aware of.
I actually have to say that I knew about this, and I did leave a phone message for you, Fred, but I was in touch with Mr. Owen regarding the mapping and whatnot, and also my concern about Mike not stepping down, and listed the citations that I had mentioned at the meeting, And I got an email back from Dave saying, concerning the planning board crossover member to the ZBA, I was informed this morning that he has agreed to recuse himself from the proceeding at the ZBA, about which you wrote to me. Legal counsel was involved in this decision-making process. That was what Mr. Owens sent back to me.
And I think that Mr. Owens' email is partially accurate. I do not believe a conclusion had been reached that morning. However, I had discussed the issue with legal counsel, as the board had requested of me. And I had spoken to others about the issue as well in a general sense, but the idea that a conclusion had been reached before perhaps board members were aware, that may be true. I work on a staff level, obviously, which is slightly different from you all. So I do have discussions with members of the board from time to time. That's part of my role as a director of planning. So I apologize if the board was not aware as soon as I was aware, but I have a different level of involvement across the board.
What happened, it put us on the spot because the applicant inferred or insinuated something was going on, and we're sitting here like, say what?
But he inferred a lot of things
Yeah.
that weren't really
Well,
accurate, so
but
you got
as
to
it
put it
turn-
in
as
light
it-
of that.
As it turns out, there was
I was as
reasons.
much in the dark as you were sitting in the room for what he was referring to.
What's that?
Sorry. I didn't know what he was talking about, just like you didn't know what he was talking about, this secret stuff that was supposed to be floating around that I knew or had access to and that he wanted and didn't know and blah, blah. I had no idea what he was talking about.
Right.
And the conversation should really shift to the minutes here, just to wrap that up. I mean, I
Yeah,
think this is a discussion for another time, but
Move the minutes as amended.
Second?
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Hey, Matt, I had
Yeah,
two questions.
Have a motion?
No, they got a motion on the
Sorry. I thought you were-
You wanted, before we adjourn the meeting, or do you want
I wanted to talk to Matt. I have two questions for the...
to? Okay.
Anything on fit?
no, I spoke to council last week on Wednesday, actually. I asked her that very question. Nothing on fit, and she actually laughed at me and said that I would have heard immediately if she had heard anything on the
I'm
case.
sure. Okay, how about Cantwell? Is 30 days up yet?
His 30 days do not believe are up yet, but just in the coming days, they'll be up. Obviously, that runs from the motion of rehearing decision. However, the town did receive a sizable information request related to several matters from Mr. Cantwell. We've worked to fill that request, but it will be ongoing, I believe, in the future. So our expectation is that perhaps something will be filed in relation
Well,
to that.
he doesn't have any extension of 30 days.
No,
I think the decision was filed February 13th.
correct. Superior, court, yeah,
Ossipee.
Ossipee.
Carroll County. So he has till the 6th of March, right, or a month? I don't know.
30 days, the decision was on the 8th.
8? Published?
And obviously, February was a shorter
So it's
month.
soon, all right, okay.
Yeah.
So he has till the 3rd? Is that what you just said?
So he has 30 days from the date of decision itself. So I'd have to get out the calendar, but
Well, it were 28 days, so it'd be the same. Plus 2.
His request for sizable right-to-know information, give him any,
No.
no. No.
so he may have missed the deadline.
He's probably,
No,
he's probably
no.
preparing to go to court.
Yeah, his filing is just basically the same stuff that he gave us. He can't say anything more or less than that. He can't add additional
He can't
grounds.
change the reasons, but he can certainly put in a whole lot of stuff.
Well, he can talk about it, sure.
He's
in his
good at that.
pleading.
So you expect to see him go?
Yes.
Okay. Let us know.
I just wanted to make a comment that I thought your packet here was very well written. So even Randy Walker said that you did a good job. So I did want to comment on that. I found it very informative and neutral, and I appreciate the time you put in.
Thank you, I appreciate it. Just one quick note, a reminder that we do have a workshop scheduled in April for the recusal subject.
We do.
And just a reminder on that, I'll give you
Isn't that the 17th?
And the date, or the time we had discussed was 6 PM. I did speak to Laura, and I asked that she be here at 5:30, just in case we wanted to move that any earlier, but we can start at 6 PM, depending on how you as the board feel. 6 PM, good?
6 is good.
She's going to be here at 5:30, though?
Yeah,
5:30 would be good, too.
it's up
Yeah,
to you.
5:30 would be fine.
5:30, other members?
We can get home earlier.
How long would you anticipate this will take?
I would say an hour to an hour and a half.
Okay. That's all
And
right.
it will be, I think, a brief presentation followed by Q&A as needed from board members.
Shall we say 5:30 then, folks?
5:30 is good to me.
5:30 sounds
I
good?
think that's fine. If we're paying her from 5:30, we might as well be there.
Yeah, absolutely.
You're going to take her to dinner?
You can tell who the former select.
What's that?
You're going to take her to dinner?
Yeah, maybe I'll have to. Well, depends how it goes.
All right, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Can I just bring up one other thing quickly? When he was talking about workshops, I thought he was going to mention April 29th, which is a Saturday. It's a planning and zoning workshop, and I think it would be very beneficial for all of the members.
Yes, and I hope everyone received that invitation via email as well.
Town buys.
Yes, we did.
Excellent.
I did.
Town pays, that's right.
All right.
Right.
That will be on our notice of meeting, will it not?
Yeah,
Yeah, but you have to pay attention to it.
yeah. I have to be here for the election, so.
Okay.
Second.
Aye.
Second, aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anybody opposed? So voted. Thank you very much.